Hi, everybody. Brad Truax here again from Eastman's Woodlands and Wildlife Committee. And today we're going to talk about white-tailed deer. The white-tailed deer is the most common large animal you're going to see here at Eastman. And they're members of the ungulate class, which simply means they're one of the mammals that have hooves. They're actually the only type of deer that we have here in New Hampshire. The adult deer typically weighs between 150 and 300 pounds. Mature females are probably about two-thirds the size of the mature males. The most salient characteristic is obviously the white underside of its tail. And when that tail is raised, it serves as an alarm that warns other deer that there might be a predator nearby. The coat of the deer is reddish brown in the summer and tends to be more of a grayish brown in winter. And the winter coats have hollow hair shafts that get filled with air, and that serves as insulation and also provides some buoyancy if they happen to be in water. And deer can run up to 40 miles an hour. They can jump 9 feet high and 30 feet forward. They've been known to actually jump right over cars on the road. And they're also very good swimmers. One interesting feature of deer, though, is that they're really partially colorblind. They have what's called dichromatic vision, which means that they see primarily two colors, blue and yellow being their primary colors, and they don't well see the oranges and reds that we see as humans. And quite frankly, that makes them particularly vulnerable when they're being hunted in hunting season. And I mentioned deers are very good swimmer, but they also like to cross our beaver dams. This is showing basically the deer crossing the beaver dam that's in Heath Forest off the Yellow Trail. Uh, male deers regrow their antlers every year, and very rarely females might have antlers. And as the antlers grow, they're covered by a highly vascularized tissue known as velvet. And the adult antler size typically increases with the age of the deer. And the bucks shed their antlers once all the females have been bred. So they shed their antlers usually late December, anywhere up to early February. The male deer is known as the buck, and the antlers are the most striking feature of the buck. And the bucks are often scored by the number of points on their antlers. This is basically showing the points. They're basically the tines that are at least 1 inch high off the main beam of the antlers. And again, hunters will typically score their buck kill by the number of points on the buck. Uh, White-tailed deer have adapted to a variety of habitats. There are over 30 million deer here in the U.S., probably about 100,000 right here in New Hampshire. And in the Northeast, they're primarily forest animals, but they can also thrive in suburban areas. They can actually cause a lot of problems in suburban areas by overeating some of the foliage and also being involved in multiple motor vehicle accidents. And white-tailed deer are crepuscular. That means that they're active at dusk and dawn, and they tend to rest during the daytime. So if you're out driving at dusk or early in the morning before dawn, you need to be very wary of deer that might be out feeding at that time. White-tailed deer are often solitary, particularly in the summer, but it's not uncommon to see multiple deer together. In fact, two types of groups may be seen, the family group or the buck group. The family group basically consists of the female, the doe, and her fawns, but the buck group may consist of anywhere from 3 to 5 individual male deer, and they have a strict dominance hierarchy. It's not uncommon to see multiple deer foraging at dusk or dawn. And if we're out driving at night, we see one deer crossing the road, we always slow down because, quite frankly, there are likely to be some other ones nearby. And in winter, deer may congregate in what are called deer yards. And I'll show you a picture of one of those in a minute. But such congregation may lead to overbrowsing of vegetation, increased motor vehicle accidents, and may also cause spread of some diseases. White-tailed deer are shy by nature and they're easily spooked, but you've all heard the phrase like a deer in the headlights, and that comes from the fact that Deer may suddenly stand still when headlights shine. That doesn't mean that they're paralyzed by fear or that they're unintelligent. It simply means that they were blinded temporarily, and that's what caused them to freeze. So, what do white-tailed deer eat? Well, they're really exclusively herbivorous, which means they eat vegetation, not meat. Their diet consists mostly of woody shoots, stems, leaves of woody plants, and some grasses or cultivated crops, nuts, particularly acorns in the fall, and berries, wildflowers, fruit, and corn when they're available. And again, in the fall, acorns constitute up to 25% of their diet. And the items they feed on are often not abundant in mature forests, so they need to do a lot of foraging around the edges of the forest. And also, they're ruminants. That means they have multiple chambered stomachs and allows them to eat some foods that humans can't eat, such as certain types of mushrooms. Uh, Browsing is the way deers feed, particularly on woody plants. So deers feed on twigs, buds, and leaves of trees and shrubs. And the browse is the primary component of their diet, and it's an important source of nutrition for them. Deer can easily digest woody browse, and they feed on it year round. And you may identify browse as a sign that deers were nearby. Deers love hostas, even though they feed on leaves of many different trees and bushes. They just love hostas, and they'll come back over and over again to a spot where they find hostas. So homeowners need to use fencing or deer repellents to save their hostas if they want them. And this is showing actually hostas that are almost unrecognizable. The deers were browsing on these hostas, and note the ragged edges that we see here. And that's a little different. Rabbits and rodents that have incisors on both jaws tend to leave clean cuts on vegetation, whereas deer leave these ragged cuts or torn edges. And again, to prevent this type of thing from happening, homeowners would need to use either fencing around their hostas or use deer repellents if they want to save those hostas. Again, this is showing the difference between browse from rabbits or rodents versus deer. Again, here on the left, you have a clean cut, and that would be from a rabbit. Here you have this ragged, shredded edge, and that's from deer. So where do deer sleep? They'll sleep almost anywhere. They don't have a fixed place that they sleep, so they'll sleep at any place that's comfortable and safe from predators. And that could be in dense vegetation in a field or under a low-hanging tree. You might see a depression on the ground or in the snow where a deer bedded down. And a day bed typically is hidden in a sheltered location, while nighttime beds can be found out in the field. This is showing a deer bed here in the snow in the winter. And this is showing a deer yard. So in winter, when there's less food availability, many deer will congregate together in a deer yard. And these might be in fields or thickets where there's still some food available. And this behavior actually helps them conserve body heat by nestling close together, and it discourages predators from attacking them. Why the white tail? Well, the underside of the tail is white. And when a deer lifts that tail, showing that white, it acts like a flag that there may be danger nearby. So the other deer see the white tail and they begin to run. And this is showing exactly that. You see the white tail popped up. All the deer are now starting to run because there was probably a threat nearby. The rut is when the female enters estrus, and this occurs in the fall, usually between late October and early November. The rut peaks here in November in New Hampshire, and the males compete with each other for mating with the females, and they'll mate with as many females as possible. In fact, they go so crazy that they often forego eating during the rutting season. And some does may be as young as 6 months when they reach sexual maturity, but the average age of sexual maturity for a female deer is probably about 18 months. Similarly, bucks usually become sexually mature at about a year and a half of age. The fawns are born in mid to late spring, usually in May or early June. An adult can have multiple fawns, though it's more common for them to have a single fawn. And the mother hides the fawn in vegetation for the first month and actually nurses them. And fawns are usually weaned by about 8 to 10 weeks, and it's about that time that they lose their characteristic white spots. There's a fawn, you see the characteristic white spots. So the fawns are born in late spring. They're hidden and nursed in the dense vegetation during that first month. They lose those characteristic white spots at about 8 to 10 weeks, and they'll begin to follow their mother foraging at about 8 to 10 weeks. And fawns are particularly vulnerable to predators. Fawns usually only weigh about 6 to 8 pounds at birth, and they'll usually nurse 4 times a day when they're newborns, and they'll continue nursing for about 4 weeks. But at about 2 weeks, they'll start to begin eating browse that their mother brings back to them, and their mother will teach them how to go out and look for food. Does may leave their fawns in hiding places for up to 4 hours while they're out foraging. The coat and the white spots of the fawn provide pretty good camouflage. And while they're waiting for their mother to return, the fawns usually just lay flat on the ground with their necks outstretched, and they're well camouflaged against either the forest floor or grassy surroundings. So if you happen to stumble upon a fawn by itself, never assume that it's been abandoned. Its mother is probably just out foraging and is likely to return shortly. Fawns are probably capable of survival once they reach about age 45 to 60 days, but they really still need to learn more from their mother. Female fawns usually stay with their mother for about a year, and then they often establish territories or ranges that are actually nearby. On the other hand, the males usually disperse at the age of about a year, and they usually go out to find other new territories. Fawns will bleat, and adult deer grunt and snort, but much of the communication is via other means. We already talked about how the raised white tail serves as an alert to the herd. Scent marking is very frequent amongst the deer. They'll urinate into what we call scrapes. I'll show you one of those in a minute. And there's an offensive scent that's released from glands between their hooves. And rubs are made by bucks with their antlers, where they strip the bark off small diameter trees. And that really helps to mark their territory and to polish their antlers. This is showing a scrape. The deer will use its hooves to scratch the leaves and debris off a small area, typically about 1 to 3 feet wide. And then they urinate down their legs. And the urine going down their legs picks up some scent molecules from their tarsal glands and deposits it here in the scrape. And this basically is a way they communicate for mating purposes. And it's not only bears and porcupines that rub bark off trees, the deers do it as well. This is due to a deer rubbing his antlers against the tree. And bucks do this to both mark their territory and to polish their antlers. The rubbing by bucks occurs anytime they have hard antlers, but it tends to peak during the pre-rut, and it maintains that level throughout the breeding season. And the bucks rub their forehead gland on a tree, and that leaves some specific information about themselves. Deer tracks are commonly seen, and the deer have bilaterally symmetrical hooves, which means one hoof is the mirror image of the other. They have sharp tips to the hooves, and they tend to curve inward. And the rear part of the deer track is usually softer and less well defined, but you may see the impression of a small dew claw near the rear side of the hoof. Actually, if you look, you don't see it here, but in this one, you're actually seeing a deer claw mark. This is showing the same thing in the snow. And in this one, you can kind of almost barely see a dew claw mark. Compared to other ungulates, the deer tracks are smaller. Here's the deer tracks in this column. This is a moose over here, an elk over here, bison here, and a cow here. So the deer tracks clearly are smaller, and you typically do see a dew claw. It's rare to see a dew claw in other ones, but occasionally you might see it with a moose. This is showing the hoof of a deer, sharp hoofed, curved inward, and the dew claws are back here. The deer track pattern may tell you what the deer was doing. Deer may walk, trot, or gallop. Deer scat appears as firm little black pellets. They're about twice the size of rabbit pellets and about half the size of moose pellets. And they're deposited in little mounds along some of the deer trails, and they may tend to clump together. But if a deer's been eating a lot of lush green plant material, the deer scat may be much looser, and there may be watery clumps of pellets. This is showing deer scat on the left, moose scat on the right. So you can see that moose pellets are considerably larger than deer pellets. The lifespan of the deer, some sources say that the average lifespan is only 2 to 4 years. That's probably wrong. Most other sites say that the average male deer lives about 6 years and the average female about 12 years. And these lifespans do tend to be shorter than some of the larger ungulates like the moose. Some of the lower average lifespan of a deer may be due to the fact that the fawns may die earlier due to attacks by predators or diseases. And typically deer die from predation, hunting, motor vehicle accidents, or diseases. But as a deer gets older, their teeth often get ground down. And if they get ground down too far, they may be no longer able to eat the food that they need, and they may die from starvation. So who are the predators of the deer? The natural predators are wolves, coyotes, cougars, alligators, jaguars, occasionally bears and wolverines, and even eagles. Well, of those, really the only one that's a predator here in New Hampshire is likely to be the coyote. But the biggest predator of deer is the human. And motor vehicle accidents are also a major cause of death for deer here in the Northeast. Deer carcasses are often scavenged by coyotes, foxes, raptors, crows, and ravens. So those deer that are killed by motor vehicle accidents or by predators actually become part of the food chain. And the whitetail of the deer, as we mentioned before, serves as an alarm that a predator may be nearby. And when danger is detected, one or more deer raise that white tail and alerts the rest of the group that there may be a risk nearby. Deer can also swim in a lake or stream in order to escape a predator. So when a predator is near, that white tail is up, serves as an alert, and other members of the herd flee when they see that. Deer and disease. White-tailed deer are the primary host for the black-legged tick, which we know causes Lyme disease in humans. And the incidence of Lyme disease in humans parallels the size of the deer population. And white-tailed deer also serve as intermediate hosts for many other tick-borne diseases like Rocky Mountain spotted fever. And some deer were also found to serve as reservoirs for COVID. Deers are also susceptible to a number of viruses, and deer get what we call chronic wasting disease. It's a small particle called a prion, which causes this, and it causes a specific type of degeneration of the brain. Chronic wasting disease hasn't yet been seen in New Hampshire, but it'll get here pretty soon. It's seen in most contiguous states. So chronic wasting disease, again, is due to fatal progressive neurological disease caused by these small particles called prions. And the signs and symptoms we'd see would be weight loss, incoordination, drooling, listlessness, and lack of fear. And again, I mentioned it's a progressive fatal neurological disease caused by these prions, and it causes what's we call a spongiform encephalopathy. These are microscopic tissue sessions of a healthy brain over here and an affected brain over here. You see all these little holes or vacuoles. It looks like a sponge. So we call it a spongiform encephalopathy. And chronic wasting disease affects animals that have hooves, so not only deer, but also elk, moose, and reindeer. And it spreads amongst the animals through contact with their saliva, blood, urine, or feces. Uh, and again, there are a couple prion diseases in humans. One is Jakob-Creutzfeldt disease, Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, and in cows, they get mad cow disease. So one of the biggest questions is, can chronic wasting disease be transmitted to humans? And periodically, there are reports of humans who develop Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease who have eaten venison. So the implication is that they got the Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease from eating the venison. But CDC has pointed out that most of those humans who got it were older, and the older age is typical for sporadic cases of Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. So there's no proven link at present between eating venison and getting Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, but continued surveillance obviously is indicated. Deer and moose don't mix. Deer and moose populations are inversely related. What that means is if there are few moose where deer are plentiful and more moose when there are few deer. So why is that? Well, it turns out that moose are susceptible to a fatal parasite. It's actually a brainworm, and deer are the victor for that brainworm. The deer carry the parasite, but they're not affected by it. Deer and motor vehicles obviously don't mix either. One of the biggest threats to deer is the motor vehicle. And motor vehicle accidents with deer most often occur at dusk or dawn when the deer are out feeding. And they're also much more frequent during mating season. In fact, here in New Hampshire, a third of all deer-related motor vehicle accidents occur between mid-October and the end of November. And again, that correlates well with the mating season. So if you're out driving at dusk or dawn, make sure you scan the roadside. And if you see one deer, there may well be other deer. So slow down and be very vigilant. Deer hunting, most states allow deer hunting at certain specified times. Here in New Hampshire, the hunting season for archery is this year from September 15th to December 15th. And for deer hunting with firearms, it's from November 13th to December 8th. And you have to have a hunting license, and there are limits to the number and the sex of deer that you can kill. And we always caution hikers to wear blaze orange when they're out hiking during hunting season so they don't inadvertently get shot. A little bit about white-tailed deer. They're probably the most common deer that you're going to encounter here in New Hampshire. Thank you.